economic opportunity, and freedom and human dignity. Cindy also chairs the Institute's Human Trafficking Advisory Council, and I know personally that this is an issue that she is very passionate about. In addition to her work at the McCain Institute, she serves on the board of directors of Project Cure and the advisory boards of Too Small to Fail and Warriors and Quiet Waters. Cindy is the chairman of the family's business, Hensley Beverage Company, which is one of the largest Anheuser-Busch distributors in the nation. You know, I'd like to say on a personal note, I've known Cindy for a number of years, and she is beloved here in Arizona and highly respected for all that she has done and what she has accomplished. I'd like to next introduce Admiral Steve Abbot, who United States Navy, and he's retired. And until September of 2019, Admiral Abbot served as the president and chief executive officer of the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, a private, nonprofit, and aid society that's dedicated to assisting sailors, Marines, and their families. From October 2001 through May of 2003, he served as a Deputy Homeland Security Advisor to the President. Admiral Abbott's last military assignment was as Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the United States European Command in Stuttgart, Germany. He oversaw the daily activities of a unified combatant command with the area encompassing approximately 89 countries and more than 13 million square miles. He was born in Pensacola, Florida. Admiral Abbot graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1966. His graduate studies included Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar. Admiral Abbot currently serves as the director of the Naval Academy Foundation. Next, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Suzie Schwartz. And Suzie has been a real champion for military spouses and families. She supports and is active in numerous military philanthropic and assistance programs. She is a passionate supporter of the Military Child Education Coalition, which focuses upon the challenges which face highly mobile military school-age children. While at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, she worked with the Fisher Foundation to establish a comfort home for the Veterans Administration Hospital in St. Louis, and more recently was instrumental in the establishment of another Fisher Home facility at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Suzie has served as an Air Force Aid Security Board member and has also actively participated in the White House Joining Forces Initiative with a purpose to mobilize all sectors of American society to support the military community. She continues to support Sesame Workshop for Military Families, Operation Homefront, and Armed Services YMCA, and the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. She is a current board member of the Fisher House Foundation National Board of Directors and serves on the Board of Advisors to the National Military Family Association. Suzie is the spouse of former Air Force Chief of Staff, General Norton Schwartz. I think his formal name is Norton. She now serves as Vice President for the Military Spouses Program for Victory Media, the publisher of Military Spouses magazine. And finally, I'd like to introduce Stuart Snedeker. Stuart grew up in rural Arizona along the Colorado River. He is the son of a small business owner, and from an early age, he was taught conservative values and what we call service above self. This example is what spurred him to become an Eagle Scout, a state vice president for the Future Business Leaders of America, and state treasurer for the Teenage Republicans. It was this same sense of service that led him to enlist in the United States Marine Corps, where he served from 1996 through 2000. After serving his country, he used his GI Bill to earn a Bachelor of Science degree in Global Business Finance from Arizona State University, and he graduated summa cum laude. In short, Stuart is a Marine Corps veteran who is highly respected for his strong core values and is a person of faith. So with that, I'd like to make some opening comments, if I might. Well, let me start with our opening question. I think that we should get right to the heart of the matter as to why these individuals have decided to give their support to Vice President Joe Biden. And I've been asked to kind of, if I might, talk about my support for Joe Biden. And I think mine's probably a little bit more personal than some of the others. There is some policy considerations. I have paid close attention. And it started some time ago. I mean, Cindy, when he, in the 2016 election, talked about John and him being a prisoner of war and not being a hero to this country, I was devastated. How could he say that of an individual that had given so much for this country? I've seen him disrespect Gold Star families. That hurt me terribly. You know, I've asked many other questions about some of his policy issues regarding the military, but I think it really made me decide to go with Joe Biden. And I'm a lifetime Republican. It has not been an easy decision. It was actually the Atlantic news article that came out some months ago, and it's been corroborated by several news organizations, including Fox News Media, that indicated that President Trump did not really show the empathy and the respect for those that are serving or have served this nation. He called them losers and suckers. And that hit me deeply and personally. You know, I joined the Marine Corps when I was a very young man. I served in Vietnam in 1968 and 69. And I joined the Marine Corps with my very best friend, David Thomas Schaefer. We were separated. I went to the 1st Marine Division. He went to the 3rd. And I was wounded in Vietnam, but shortly after I was wounded, he was killed in Vietnam. Dear friend of mine. And I thought, a loser? I couldn't understand that. And I would never accept that. And then, of course, you know, having been wounded, and I was seriously wounded. I was in military hospitals for a year. And I saw literally hundreds of veterans, you know, come to in those hospitals, and I saw their suffering. And I knew that there's a lifetime of pain that they would have and have to deal with their disability. Now, they're not suckers. They serve this country. They need to be honored and revered. And that's when I decided I needed to not just vote against him, but I decided to speak out against President Trump. I cannot support a commander-in-chief that does not have our back when times get to be real tough. With that, Cindy, I'd like, you know, can you kind of tell us why you've decided to support Vice President Biden?
Well, first of all, I want to tell everyone, thank you for coming. And thank you for listening to us tonight. This is a very important issue regarding our active duty and our veterans. And most importantly, it's about the future of this country. I'll begin with the fact I'm a Republican, just like Rick is. And I have no intention of changing my party. That's not why I'm here. But I do believe that we need to do what's right for this country. And I had the same reaction you did, Rick. I was listening to this. I'd listened through the months and listened to him denigrate my husband and then denigrate my husband again while my husband was on his deathbed. I listened to it, and that's a side. So that happens. And John kept telling me, he said, don't, it's just politics. Don't react to it. And I didn't. But when the president decided to call my children and my husband and my father and all the other hundreds of people in my family that have served honorably, losers and suckers, that was the tipping line for me. Because I think particularly about what this president has done to this country with regards to leadership and how we stand globally right now really concerns me, because my boys are serving. My boys are part of this. I also resented a great deal, Rick, and I know you know this. I resented hearing that there was money given by the Russians to the Taliban to target and kill American troops in Afghanistan. My son was there. He was there. So I think it's time that we elect a president that is leadership quality, that knows what's right and wrong, that has empathy and concern, but more importantly, acts for the country and not himself or the party. That's really what I'm looking for. And I also know that since I've known Joe for a long time, I don't know if many of you know this story, but our families have known each other for 40 more years. And we both had sons in Iraq at the same time, not at the same place. But so at the same time, we were running against each other, and that's not the right term. We both had sons serving. It changes you. It changes you as a person, and it changes your focus. And I just believe that Biden is not only who I think we should be voting for, but can bring esteem and worth back to the international stage on behalf of the United States of America.
Wonderful. Admiral Abbot.
Rick, thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be with you and with the other panelists, and a real pleasure to be able to talk to my fellow citizens in Arizona and to talk a little bit about Joe Biden. But like you, I'm going to need to start out by talking about John McCain. I was 13 years old, living at the Naval Academy when my father was the deputy commandant. And the deputy commandant is responsible for all the discipline among the midshipmen at the Naval Academy. And so he actually got to know John McCain pretty well. And then, as it turned out, John McCain came back and served on board my father's ship, the USS Intrepid, when John was an A1 driver, and he actually stood deck watches, as we say in the Navy, and he and my dad got close. Of course, my father was a contemporary of John's dad and knew the family. So, you know, that was a motivation for me to get on to flight training, which I eventually did, and ended up flying the same kind of airplanes that John McCain did. I was in the Tonkin Gulf on the Enterprise in the middle of March 1973 when the prisoners were released from North Vietnam. I'll never forget it. And when the candidate Trump in 2015 said that he was not a hero, I had the same reaction you did, Rick. It was visceral and emotional, and I couldn't vote for him in 2016, so I didn't. But I watched as the next 4 years have evolved, and frankly, I've watched a series of missteps, and you and Mrs. McCain have mentioned a couple of them. I would just mention a couple of others. I was distressed at the treatment that our allies and friends received from the president. And I feel like we have done significant damage to our alliances, especially the NATO alliance. And we need these friends. We will never fight without having our friends and allies alongside. But I watched a series of other incidents. I'll just mention a couple. The intervention of the president in legal matters. There was a senior chief who was a SEAL who was convicted in a court-martial of offenses that his colleagues, considered him guilty of, and the president intervened to set aside his conviction and restore his rank. I thought it was a totally inappropriate intervention. There were another couple of things that occurred. One in which he interfered with the relief of the commanding officer of the USS Theodore Roosevelt over COVID development on board that ship. But there were also some very serious incidents, as have been recounted, about the relationship that the president developed with what I would say are our adversaries, of getting close to Putin and close to Kim Jong-un. And these are the individuals who we need to be organized to be certain that we can deal with. And instead, we seem to be palling up with them. And I thought that that was a serious mistake. But then I'm getting around to tell you the real reason that I just got to this year, 2020, and watched COVID envelop this country. And I saw the administration commit what I thought were a series of missteps that I worked in the White House for a little while. I watched us work our way out of the, crisis of 9/11, and thought that the White House did a pretty decent job at that. I watched this White House deal with COVID. It was like the failure of management 101. Every step seemed like an error. And as for leadership, it was the violation of that cardinal principle of us military people of leadership by example. The president just was not providing it. And so I said, nope, this ship's getting underway from the pier. I am not going to support Trump. I'm going to support Joe Biden, because I know from my own experience that he is just the opposite kind of a person. He brings people together. He doesn't divide them, which is what has happened in this country. We've gotten divided in a serious way. And I know that Joe Biden is the person that's going to bring us back together. So I'm delighted that I'm going to be able to vote for Joe Biden.
Thank you for your strong voice. How about Suzie Schwartz?
Hi, thanks for having me. I have to honestly say, Cindy, that when they told me that you were going to be on this panel, I said, well, then you don't need me at all. But here I am, and happy to be here, honestly. I was thinking today about what I would say. I came around to this decision early. I am not a Republican, but I have voted independent my whole life. I have sat on those Capitol steps during an inauguration, and I have never heard someone use the phrase, "this American carnage," while the presidents were sitting behind him. My heart was broken on that very same day. But my husband told me to keep the faith, that it was going to be okay. And every day it wasn't. And every day got worse. And I tell you what really switched for me for sure to know that I was going to be voting Democrat, honestly, was my husband saying to me, this is what I gave my life for. And I'm watching it being destroyed by an individual who stands there and never takes responsibility. As a spouse, you don't get to have a voice a lot. I mean, you do, but you kind of stand beside and you support quietly, and you figure out ways to make things happen. Don't underestimate what we can do. But when you watch your husband who says every night goes to bed depressed, that really does get to you. And also he taught me, he used to say, do the right thing. And every time when I would have a decision to make, he'd say to me, you know what the right thing is. Now do it. And then today, I posted this event on Facebook. And I have a nice following of young military spouses that I have privileged to get to the opportunity to work with. And one of them posted, thank you for being our voice in a time in a country where I'm afraid to use my own name on Facebook. So then for sure I knew I was doing the right thing. I can support Joe Biden. I have wonderful stories when we get to a point where you can tell stories. No, I'll tell one right now. Sitting at graduation at the Air Force Academy. It starts out freezing that morning. It's a long day, as many people know. It's about 3 hours, as Joe Biden was the speaker that year. After shaking hands for 3 hours with every single cadet as they get their diploma, he walked off the stage, across the football field, got in his car, started to go under the tunnel to exit the stadium. And all of a sudden, we're all waiting because, we can't do anything until he's out of the stadium. We see the brake lights come on. We're like, uh-oh, what's wrong? He got out of his car and went up and down that tunnel and shook the hand of every single young cadet standing in that tunnel. And that is a vision I will never forget. That's my reason.
Best reason of all. Best reason of all. Stuart. Stuart.
Hi, Rick.
Hi.
So first, I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate this opportunity to share my story. First, I'd like to thank my wife, Ruth, who has stuck by me thick and thin as we walk this journey together. It's not easy being a Republican and a Christian in Arizona and coming out in favor of Vice President Biden. But I too wanted to share my own little John McCain story. Like you mentioned, I was in high school involved in the Teenage Republicans, and our family would attend the Mojave County GOP picnic every summer, and we would go to the Lincoln Day dinners in the spring. And one spring, my father took me as a young man, and John McCain was there, and he introduced me to the senator. And my father said some offhand remark about, someday this boy will have your job, Senator. And the senator smiled at me and shook my hand and said, "When you're ready, come look me up." And it was a very powerful and wonderful time, to be involved in the party. And so I lost my father about a year before Senator McCain passed. And the senator's passing and my father's own are the two events that I can remember as a grown man, a father of three, as a husband, where I wept openly. And the reason I was so moved wasn't because I knew the senator personally. What really affected me was the feeling that the passing of Senator McCain left a void, that he was one of the last principled, character-driven, value-driven leaders that we had in the party. And things have changed since I was a boy. I remember the Republican Party is standing for family values and honesty and integrity and self-determination, respect for the military and for public service. Now the Republican Party seems to stand for whatever the president says it does. And it has moved quite a ways away from the conservative leadership that I remember as a child. Further, so the reason why I've decided to come out for Joe Biden. So first, Joe Biden is a man that I can identify with. I identify with his faith, with his devotion to God and to church. He's also a man, reading his story and getting to know him a little bit better, has endured much tragedy, surviving a wife and a daughter and a son. He's somebody who has experienced great depth of emotion in his life. And when he talks about the power of prayer and his faith in God sustaining him through those dark periods of time, I believe him to be sincere. It resonates with me. When I lost my father, and recently when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, it was my relationship with God and my prayer life that kept my head above water. And so I very much appreciate that aspect of him. But another thing that I would share is that as a Christian, we believe that the Word of God is alive and powerful, and it can change hearts. And I was recently reading in the book of Luke, and there's also a parallel passage in Matthew, where they talk about the fruits. They talk about every person bearing fruit. And the passage says that a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit, and that we should not expect to pick grapes from a thorn bush or a bramble bush to give us figs. And I'm struck by, well, okay, it goes a little bit further to say that these fruits manifest themselves in a person's heart. And what is in their heart then comes out of their mouth. And I was completely struck by the fruits of this presidency. The lies, the half-truths, the conspiracy theories that are promulgated, his moral character, 220,000 people dead from COVID-19. We have anti-government militias taking over state capitals with guns. And it's astonishing to me. And we didn't even get alone. We didn't even get to the part where the family separation at the border. All of these fruits are, in my estimation, pretty vile and wicked, and they leave a very awful taste in my mouth. And we have no expectation that this president will produce any good fruit anytime soon, because I don't believe he's capable of it. And so I'm excited to support a candidate, to support a president who can produce good fruit, somebody who is capable of producing the fruit of reconciliation and healing in our country that we so desperately need. And more than anything, I want a president who takes responsibility for what's happening around him, who can level with the American people, to be honest, to make hard choices. And that person is Joe Biden. Over 40 years of public service, we've watched him reach across the aisle. We've seen him do difficult things and do it in a bipartisan way. It's not theoretical whether or not he will cross the aisle. He has done it so many times. And I'm tired of the divisiveness and the hateful rhetoric. And I want to get back to a president that I can be proud of.
All well and good. I think that we have a variety of different perspectives here of why we're all supporting Vice President Biden. Let's try to perhaps talk a little bit more, provide a little bit greater insight in certain areas. You know, Cindy, you have a unique perspective in that you know Joe Biden very well. How might a Biden-Harris administration be different than the Trump administration? What do you think are the major points that and how he will be different?
As was just mentioned, working across the aisle. I mean, there were no bigger opponents on issues than Joe and John. But both of them, Joe and John, would reach across the aisle. They would work together. They would fight like cats and dogs. But then it wasn't personal. They'd go to dinner with each other. That's the difference with Joe Biden. He's willing to not only work across the aisle, but sit down and talk and listen to people. Listen to what's in their hearts and on their minds, and then work with that and try to make a difference. I think more importantly, it's all very personal. All voting is very personal for people. But I might add, for me, what makes a big difference for me is that I feel very unsafe right now, not necessarily in a literal sense, but I feel like my country's forgotten me. There's COVID running everywhere. I worry about my sons particularly, and my daughters as well. I worry about having someone that will actually have my back. And for the first time, I believe I have a candidate now post this administration that will have my back and that will be concerned about the issues that I'm concerned about. And some of those issues are exactly what we're talking about, and that is the U.S. military. And as was mentioned earlier, also about the utter disrespect for not only our allies, but people that actually work in the field, our ambassadors, the way he's treated some of our ambassadors, people who dedicate their lives to things like this. It's time we demand as Americans respect. We demand civility. We should be demanding common ground, bipartisanship, and we will get that from Joe Biden. He will always put country first. That's why I'm voting for him.
You know, if I can jump in, and this is, I hope we can have a conversation. You know, when you said that you know, Joe Biden will have your back. You know, those of us that have been in combat or are serving the military, that is the one thing that we understand, is that will that person beside me in the foxhole be there, that I know that they will be able to support me and have my six, as we say it in many times.
Right.
And, you know, I asked the individuals that are watching tonight, I mean, who would you rather have in the foxhole next to you, Biden or Trump? I mean, really? I mean, that's a basic question. Look at, you know, and Admiral, you can maybe jump in here. I mean, I was so offended, you know, when the pulling out of Syria, and he let the Kurds literally be decimated, you know, a genocide, and our allies. It shocked me. That is not the way you treat people that have been there for you, that have died for you. That's not the America I believe in.
No. That's not who we are as Americans either. Please, Admiral, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I just wanted to say that I actually was able to travel in northern Iraq and met with the Kurdish leadership. And I know that they have been stalwart friends for this country over decades. And when we abandoned them, and of course, General Mattis resigned over that decision, it was breaking faith with people who had literally risked their lives, and in many cases given their lives to protect our interests as well as their own. And then the other downside was it left a vacuum for the Russians to enter, basically gave them a carte blanche. And we now have the stew that exists in that part of the world with not only the Russians, but sadly also our Turkish NATO allies have not been entirely helpful. And it's a situation which we should not have permitted to develop.
Exactly.
Let's move on to
you know, Rick, if I may.
Sure, absolutely.
Admiral Abbot said something that strikes home for me, and I believe you know, Admiral McCraven came out in support of Vice President Biden today. General Mattis resigned. You've come out, Admiral Abbott, in support of Joe Biden. And it strikes me just how many flag officers in the U.S. military and career foreign service diplomats are telling us that they don't want to work for this man any longer. And I think that at some point we have to take them at their word, that it's not some conspiracy theory that all of these people are resigning or protesting, that there are real issues that need to be addressed, and we should trust these long-serving diplomats and generals and admirals. You know, we should just trust them that there is something wrong.
You know, those of us that have been in the military, we took an oath, and I look at it as my oath will follow me to the day that I die. And I believe I have an obligation to our country. I think that that's really what we're getting to, the America that I believe in.
Rick, I'm going to say it's service.
It's service. Service above self.
Service to your country. And that is what we all feel. That's what we know in our heart. And Joe Biden does that. You know, early in my marriage to my husband, I really kind of, sorry to any political people out there, but I did not necessarily see politics as service. And I'm very sad about that, because later in life, I appreciate service at every level. And that is what Joe Biden brings, is 40 years of service to this country. And I think we need that more than anything. And I also do believe that he can work across the aisle. I mean, I have seen it. He was asked to go do the eulogy for Senator Stevens. in Alaska. Nort and I were there. It was moving. It was powerful. And like you said, Mrs. McCain, that they knew each other. They went to dinner. They were families. And that's what I'm hoping, and I believe with all my heart, that he can bring back to this country.
I think a large part of that too, and I think we're all saying it, but in different ways, is it's time that our leader, our president of the United States, show empathy, compassion, dignity, respect, and civility to not only the constituents, which are the United States of American citizens, but also to the world. I'm, how many times have all of you traveled prior to COVID, and you'd run into people overseas, and they'd say, "What is going on with you guys?" Kind of like scratching their heads, and that's embarrassing for us. I believe that we are the greatest nation ever, and I truly believe that Joe Biden will reinvigorate this. But if I can say lastly, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but my husband lived, as all of you do, I know, by the code of conduct: duty, honor, country. That is something I know Joe Biden will live by, and this administration does not.
Let's turn a little bit to military families. And I'd like to go to Suzie if I could. Suzie, I had two sons that served as well in the Marine Corps, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq. They came home safely. But, having been wounded myself, I will tell you, I've been in combat, but when my sons went into combat, I think it was harder for me as a parent than it was for me in combat. It was so difficult. And you do so much. I mean, Fisher House, all of the different programs that you can support. Give me an idea as to, what are the issues that are facing military families right now? How do they feel today with the current administration? Are they there for them? Do they believe that they'll, if they have to go into harm's way, that it'll be for the right decisions? Can you give some insight into that, Suzie?
Sure. A lot of them don't say anything because they're afraid to say anything. Those that are still serving on active duty, they're very afraid. But for the most part, they see what happens when the current president puts these soldiers or sailors or airmen behind him and basically gives a political rant with people in uniform standing right behind him. They know that that's not right. And you feel it. You feel it everywhere you go. You feel it within all the organizations when they know they don't have top cover. They know that there's no support. I'll give you one personal example. I was asked to speak at an event in DC. And suddenly I was asked to not speak at that event because Ivanka was going to speak at that event, and she demanded that no one else speak at that event. But the day before the event, she didn't show, and so they had no speaker. That's the kind of treatment that they really get out there, and they feel it. They know that it's not right. They absolutely know it's not right. And I believe that Joe knows how to do it right. I know his wife knows how to do it correctly. She found out we were opening up a Fisher House and a Center for the Families of the Fallen at Dover. She wanted on that plane with me. She wanted to be right there. And I know that will continue.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I apologize that I haven't been able to get to all the questions, but, we're running short of time. I do want to ask one final question to kind of wrap it up. And this is to the entire group. In casting your support for Vice President Biden, what are you looking for in his administration that will restore the confidence and the trust in America and with our military and those that have served our veterans? What are all of you looking for? Anybody jump in? Hard question, I know.
For me, I'm looking for character, integrity, values, and as I mentioned before, empathy and compassion. Our country is many things, but we're also human beings, and I believe that that without empathy, you can't really understand a fellow human being's struggle. And so I'm hoping that's exactly what Joe will do. I believe it will, among many other things. But those are the things I'm looking for right now.
I keep hoping for decency and leadership.
I think that's
And
what I'm at. Go ahead. I'm in leadership. Go ahead, Admiral. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
I long for a president who can listen. I was able to watch Bush 43 over a couple of years, and you may have different opinions about W, but he could sit down and listen and take intelligence briefs and work through big fat notebooks of information and ask tough questions. That's the kind of person Joe Biden is. He's going to bring around him the experts that he needs to have to be able to make decisions. That's been our failure this year with the COVID crisis, is not listening to the experts. And I firmly believe that that's the way this country works best. And Joe can do it not only within the executive branch, but he can do it working across to Capitol Hill as well.
You know, for me, it's leadership. The kind of leadership that commands respect. Not that you just have the power to give the command, but it commands a respect. The one that is willing to follow you, that has the ideals of what we are as an American. I mean, you know, this is off the topic of veterans issues. I just don't understand how any administration could separate a mother from their babies at the border. Yes, it's an issue. Yes, we have a problem there and we've got to deal with it. But how you deal with it is as critical as dealing with it. And we as Americans, we don't separate mothers from their babies. I mean, that is not the America that I fought for and bled for. And I don't think that that's the America that all of those that have stood up and taken the oath want in this country. And it's that lack of leadership. And I'm very, very disappointed. And that goes probably beyond the president, quite frankly. So with that, Stuart, I'm going to ask you one final question and then we'll get to Cindy wrapping it up. You know, new recruits are in the military. They spend their time in boot camp being instilled with core values that they carry with them for the rest of their service and really for the rest of their lives. You know, how do these core values and your faith affect your thinking about the president and how he's conducted himself in these last 4 years?
So I can clearly remember as a recruit at MCRD San Diego, being on the quarterdeck with a drill instructor in our face, and they were trying to instill the Marine Corps' core values of honor, courage, and commitment. And they had their own way of doing so. They had a 3-count exercise for it. And so from the position of attention, you'd have to snap into a push-up position and you would shout honor. And then you would complete the push-up and you would say courage, and then you would snap up and say commitment. And that was a pretty good way to have us memorize it. And but over time, you know, as you serve and as you have a family, these values start to mean something different to you. And when we talk about honor, I think about integrity, being morally fit, having character, being somebody that somebody can trust, right? And if you tick down the list of all of the honorable characteristics, I am hard pressed to find one that the current president could check off. And it would be very easy for me to see Joe Biden checking off all of the list. And then we could get into courage and commitment, right? But my faith plays a big role in this, because I can't stand by anymore and watch this president pander to the right, to evangelicals, right? He is not somebody who I can identify with as a Christian. And I'm looking for a president who, embodies the same faith ideals, who has struggled the same way I have. And Joe Biden is clearly that candidate in my estimation.
Well, you're all fantastic. And we're beginning to get close to wrapping it up. And I'm going to ask Cindy, for any final thoughts that she may have, and, a call to action, quite frankly.
Thank you. Well, I hope, if nothing more, for all of you who are listening tonight, that you at least see from us the importance of perhaps considering Biden as your candidate for president. What I would like to leave all of you with is one thing that I think is so extremely important, and that if Biden were elected president, he would be a president for all Americans, not just Americans that agree with him. He would be a president that would put your health and your safety first. This is a time of crisis, and this is not the time to lie. Never is it the time, but to lie to the American people about what's really going on, and somehow making sure that the folks that are the real experts are not a part of the equation. It's also a time that I believe that we need to have courage as people to step across the aisle. And I think Joe brings those kinds of qualities to the table. And most of all, he puts country first, not party. And that of course, is why we're here. And that's to encourage you to vote. The only way you can make a difference is if you vote. And we certainly hope that you will consider Joe Biden as your next president.
Fabulous. As we close out this, and we're a little bit early, but let me give some closing remarks, if I might. As we close out this panel discussion, I think it's important to, first of all, thank all those that are joining us tonight for their service to our nation. I've learned, as I've read so much history, that throughout, this nation's history, America has called upon its finest to defend and protect our freedoms, or our ideals, and our values. And you that have served, epitomize the best of our nation. Your service and your sacrifice shall never be forgotten. And I ask you to think back upon your oath that you took. You did it because a variety of different reasons, but you understood what you were fighting for. And I think that we're at that point in time. We are to one of the most consequential elections that at least I have had, I think, in my lifetime. And in 2 weeks, quite frankly, people are voting right now. And in 2 weeks, on November 3rd, the final votes will be cast. They may still be counted for who will be the next president of the United States. But I believe that this election is more than voting for a president. I believe it is about us as Americans. That person that we elect into the Oval Office to sit behind the resolute desk is a reflection of us, a reflection of our values, a reflection of our character. And at the end of the day, we must rely upon that person to reflect who we are as a nation. And that's why I am voting for, and I'm so strongly supporting Joe Biden. He is a humble person, a good person, a person of honesty. And as president, I believe Joe Biden will respect those that are currently serving in your service. So I hope you will vote for Joe Biden. In fact, I'm going to ask you to go out and get your friends to vote for Joe Biden. Go to iwillvote.com. Make a plan. Vote early. Get out there and vote. But regardless of who you vote for, I'm asking that you just vote. That is America. And you have earned that right. So please get up and vote. I'd like to thank my panel. I mean, it was an extraordinary panel. You made my life very easy tonight, and you've been wonderful. So with that, I will close off a few minutes early, but I was kind of told through a text message that I was running late, and now I'm running a few minutes early. But I thank everybody, and I hope to see everybody again. And thank you. You're wonderful as a panelist, and I thank you that are tuning in for your service to the country.
Thank you, Rick. Well done.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
You better think about what you're trying to do to me. Think, let your mind go, let yourself be free. Let's go back, let's go way on, way back when. I didn't even know you couldn't have been too much more than 10.